Okay, this is the second part of it. We're going to talk about Professor Call's yoga experiences and building into his Tai Chi experiences. He began studying Tai Chi at a certain time. We're going to start talking about that now.
Sounds good.
Okay. Tai Chi. Yoga was done. Did you start Tai Chi in the summer, or did you start Tai Chi after the kickboxing classes were over? I believe they stopped at that intensity level in
End of August.
End of August.
Yeah. Yeah, the kickboxing classes, we had been doing it in the way that we described in the previous segment. Those ended by end of August, and there were some logistical constraints. The space moved. So we moved into a different kind of training regimen. So at that point, I continued with the yoga. I continued with the newer version of the kickboxing class. But there was at that point, we also knew that we were going to roll into eventually an evening at the same time, a Tai Chi class, which frankly is something I've always wanted to try, I've always wanted to study, and never had the opportunity to do so. So it was a fantastic piece of timing, really, nice synchronicity. But otherwise, the regimen consisted of mostly the same thing. Usually an hour of some kind of more strenuous physical exercise, the kickboxing, followed by an hour of yoga.
Yeah, got it. The Tai Chi, you also began, I believe, in September. You got so intense with it that you began studying Tai Chi weightlifting and traditional Western weightlifting, Olympic style, clean and jerk, and you started doing brass ring, which is old style kung fu brass work, and you started wooden dummy training, and we got really deep into Pilates ball training. Which is somewhat unique to a lot of other martial arts type of techniques. Can you tell me a little bit more about it first with regard to why Tai Chi, at least the Tai Chi is, I've been teaching you, how did that affect you as far as, well, how did you take it?
You know, the appeal for me in Tai Chi is really, there's a couple of basic reasons, I think. I've always been interested in martial arts. I've traditionally done martial arts. But I've hit a point in my life where I wanted something different from the martial arts, is the best way of saying it. Fitness really has been the primary goal. Tai Chi afforded me the opportunity of studying the things I love about martial arts without the overarching framework of competing in tournaments, thinking about one's actions as being necessarily aggressive or violent or malicious. I'm a college professor. I have a different way of being about myself now than when I was 18 and obnoxious. And so the idea really for me was that Tai Chi fit more naturally with my life as it is now and seemed the best kind of martial art for me to study. And again, I've always been curious. I've never lived anywhere where I've had access to study Tai Chi. So it's one of those things you hear about, you see it represented in media and film, but you never get a chance to do it.
You read my book about my certain take on Tai Chi, which is a more rudimentary, or I should say, radical way of approaching it. I do the basic 13 dynamics of Northern Chinese Kung Fu. It works the core. Describe when you first read the book, compared to what you actually started to actually do it. How was that?
The thing that was interesting was I was expecting a more steep learning curve for myself. But I think a lot of this had to do with the way that we were teaching the class, or rather the way that I was learning in the class, because it was very much about how Tai Chi gets coupled with Western-style boxing, which I've done a little boxing before. I did a little Golden Gloves in college, so there was some familiarity for me. The postures felt similar. The ways that the body moved felt similar. I could draw, in some ways, on previous experiences in the martial arts to make sense out of the motions of Tai Chi. So when we go through the postures, when we move through the various forms, I can understand what's a strike, what's a block, what's an evasion, how that translates into footwork relative to an opponent or a practice partner. So between the way the class was taught and the way that the, if you will, philosophy of the framework for the teaching was described in the book that you wrote, it made sense. I had ready access to the ideas and what we were doing.
I'm glad of that, because when I wrote that book, I can honestly say I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. And that was a book years ago, but it's good that there's some building on it. The doctor and I are working on a new book called The Memetics of Tai Chi Boxing, based on the next level, alchemy, and how one is able to put the mindfulness training and insert it into their physical training, their physical fitness, which literally does have a external and an internal component to it. That being said, can you describe, I say the word form and function.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that what you're doing now with regard to the Taiji boxing is a form correlation to function type of thing? And then why would you say so?
It's definitely a form correlation to function, especially because you can see the purpose of the form in what you're doing. But what's interesting about it is that it actually seems like there's multiple purposes. The form serves multiple functions. There's a martial science function to it. This is a strike, this is a block. You move your body in this way relative to an opponent because it produces this effect if done correctly. That's good, that makes sense, I understand that. But what's more interesting to me is, and I'm seeing more of this the more we practice and the more I study and the more I read, the more I meditate, the more I breathe, is I'm also starting to understand the ways in which these motions really kind of correlate with internal functionality. The ways in which motions, strikes, postures, guards, steps, all these various martial components directly correspond to specific elements of breathing, mental focus, visualization, and really the ability to imagine oneself as a person doing this, which I had not really anticipated at the beginning of this training. At the beginning of this training, I imagined this is muscle memory. I'll learn the postures and then I'll have them. But what I'm finding is the more I do them, the more I practice them, the more I focus on them, the more I actually refine them, and the more, I'm not sure what the best way to say this is, but the way I'll say it is the more the practice of the posture starts to look more like me and less like the form.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
You're expressing yourself through
Right.
the thing.
Yes.
There's a lot of things going on there. You mentioned meditation. I've asked some questions. Do you meditate regularly?
Daily.
How many every day? And an average of a week, how many hours of meditation do you think you put in? Now, when I say that, meditation involves the practice of seating, practicing your postures. It could be moving, and it could be moving meditation where the body's dynamic. It could be stilling meditation where the body is in a posture which is static, whether on the floor or standing. And that being said, this is outside of you hitting the bag,
Right.
and outside of you lifting weights. Whether it's a form weight with the weights or whatever, how many hours of meditation do you think you actually do with that?
At least an hour and a half a day. So, well, no, actually more than that, really, more than that. That's really just what I put into the seated meditations. I'd say between 15 and 20 hours. I mean, on a week, yeah. On a really, really super busy week where I'm tremendously crunched with grading and work, 15 hours. On a week where I've got time, 20. And when I'm not going to be in the semester, when I'm not teaching regularly, probably more than that.
So the professor knows about, you do know about the 10,000 hour rule.
10,000 hours, yes, 10,000 hours for mastery.
So the professor is putting in what we will describe as mimetic psychology of Tai Chi boxing, which is of course an exercise in stilling and moving meditation, or stilling and moving mindfulness exercise or regimens. He is putting in approximately 15 to 20 hours a week of personal training, not including the 6 hours a week, the 4 to 6 hours a week of group training. Together, he is averaging 20 hours a week of